everybody. Good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Growth and Planning meeting. Thank you all for being here tonight. Want to make sure that we introduce those folks that are here. Want to introduce our board president, Monica Ryan.
Thank you.
Board member, Ms. Lee. Board member, Ms. Jones. And over here, board member, Ms. Stanford. And board member, Ms. Canoyer. Thank you all for being here. And also want to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Fields. So tonight, like I said, this is Growth and Planning meeting. I'm Dan Brooks, Assistant Superintendent of Operations. We're going to be going over our demographers facility district report. And then after that, we're going to talk about a couple of things. It's on the agenda. We're going to talk about the facility assessment that was conducted by, we partnered with RBK and Corgan, and we came up with a facility assessment. So we're going to be talking about some things there. But this committee is going to be working to help us to come up with ways that we can reduce the deficit. And I'm sure with all of you guys being here, you know about our deficit in our district. You know, the debater did not pass, so the voters have spoken, the community has spoken, and so we have some work to do. And so tonight, what we will do is we're going to go through the report that the demographer, Mr. Templeton, he's not here tonight, but he did do a video. The video is about 25 minutes long. We may, as he's talking in the video, and we have screens all around the room, you can see what he's talking about. We may be stopping it periodically to either elaborate on some things that he's saying. I'm sure Dr. Fields is probably going to say stop, and then he's going to start talking about some things. But throughout the demographer's presentation, if you need us to stop it so that we can explain something that may have been said in the video, please, raise your hand, let us know, and then we'll stop it, and then we'll talk about whatever we need to talk about. Then we will go over, again, some of the facility assessment information that we got. We will be planning another meeting before the winter break, because out of this committee, we're going to be coming up with recommendations, and I'll just get to cut through the chase. We are going to have to recommend some schools to be consolidated. That is, we have to recommend that. This committee is going to be doing that work to come up with those recommendations to recommend to the board. And so the next meeting that we have, we're going to have a lot of information that you guys will have in your hands to be able to look at and whatnot, and then we'll be able to do some either dots or whatever we want to call them to come up with what we feel in this room, this committee, we think are the schools that we think need to be consolidated, and how we come up with that. What criteria are we going to use? Those types of things. So without further ado, unless Dr. Fields has something he wants to say, we're going to go ahead and start the demographer's PowerPoint. And again, if you have questions while he's going through this, raise your hands, ask him to stop, and we'll stop it and answer the questions that you might have.
Demographic report. I'll start by talking about the local economic conditions. We're using the unemployment rate. Hello, this is Bob Templeton with Zonda Demographics, providing a video summary of the Judson Independent School District's November demographic report. I'll start by talking about the local economic conditions. We're using the unemployment rate to give us a gauge of how the San Antonio's economy is performing You'll notice back in June of 25, the unemployment rate for the San Antonio region was at 3.8%, which is well below what the Texas rate was, which was about 4.1%. It's also one of the lowest unemployment rates in the state of Texas. When we look at the new home market, Texas continues to have the strongest new home market in the country. In fact, the San Antonio region is ranked 4th in the nation for new home construction with an annualized start rate of 18,294 new homes. When we look at the region's new home market by starts and closings, the dark purple line is the annualized start rate. You can see how it had a pretty dramatic increase in new home activity starting in 2020. It peaked in 2022, and then the rising interest rates did cause a slowdown in new home starts. But starting in 2023, it made a comeback again. And as over the last couple of quarters, the new home start rate in San Antonio is at about 18,294. The closing rate is tracking a little bit above the start rate, and that's because we had an inventory of existing homes that were on the market. So we do expect that 2025 and in the year 2026, likely to see about 18,000 new homes per year across the San Antonio region. When we look at the total home sale market, this data includes existing homes and new homes. What you'll notice is we still are seeing a settling of the average price. The average price has settled in at about $364,000. This is much lower than what we're seeing in the Austin region. So the San Antonio market is a little more affordable than the other major markets across the state of Texas. That does put that in a better position to weather the economic concerns around still high cost of housing and the consumer confidence concerns. We have seen a little bit of an increase in the number of listings. So listings of existing homes has gone from about 76,000 to about 89,000. When you see an increase in listings, that increases the supply, which should help stabilize the pricing. Now, when we look at our new home data for the San Antonio region, we rank all the school districts based on annualized closings of new homes. You can see Judson is ranked 10th in the San Antonio region with a closing rate of 662 closings. We had 231 homes in inventory. Those are homes that are under construction and some finished vacant homes. We have 685 vacant developed lots. We have about 388 future lots that are in the planning stages. So you can see we've got a little over 1,000 vacant developed lots and futures in the planning pipeline. So we likely will see about 300 to 400 new homes per year for the next 3 to 4 years. We track that data by quarter. The table on the left, highlighted in purple, represents the start rate by quarter. We had 161 new home starts in the second quarter. As you can see, it is slowing down, and that's just primarily because we're running out of land and we're seeing a lower number of vacant developed lots. Through the first 2 quarters in 2025, we closed about 212 homes. We estimate that we're probably going to close between 400 to 450 homes through the remainder of 2025. When we break down your new home data by your elementary attendance zones, Wortham Oaks Elementary has the most new home activity with 141 annual starts. The second most active is Escondido with 80 starts, and Converse has the third highest amount of start activity with 67. You'll notice that Wortham Oaks has the highest amount of starts. It also has the highest amount of vacant developed lots, the highest amount of futures. So we're likely going to be seeing Wortham Oaks to continue to build about 100 to 140 homes per year for the next 3 to 4 years. You are starting to run out of vacant developed lots. So the vacant developed lot supply is starting to shrink, as is the future lot supply. I'll touch on some of the highlights. When we look at the district, and this is a map of your elementary attendance zones outlined in purple. The green shaded areas are your active subdivisions that are building single family homes. We've got a couple of yellow subdivisions, which are the future subdivisions in the planning stages. You can see the concentration of activity that's taking place in the north in Wortham Oaks, and And then we've got a concentration of activity in the Escondido, in the Masters, Hartman, and in the edge of the Copperfield zone. Your top 5 most active subdivisions: Langdon has the most activity with 182 closings, Liberté Ventura with 83 closings, Willowview 66, Canyon Crest 63, High Top Ridge 53. That's the annual closings of new single-family homes. Some of the highlights here: Langdon, up in the Wortham Oaks Elementary Zone, 102 total lots. They've got 80 homes under construction. They've closed about 182 homes in the last 12 months. And this is a D.R. Horton development. The price ranges are in the upper almost 300,000 and above. Here's our satellite image from this summer, where you can see the activity of homes under construction and the future section. The Klopp development is 124 vacant developed lots. All the lots have been delivered for home building this past summer. We anticipate the first homes being ready possibly early 2026. This is in the Masters Elementary attendance zone. Now, those were just a couple of the highlights that we're seeing in terms of single-family construction. On the multifamily picture across the San Antonio region, we do continue to see relatively low occupancy rates. The June 25 occupancy rate for the San Antonio region was at 84.8%. You can see the rent rates have kind of been up and down over the last several months. We've got about 50% of the apartments that are offering concessions to lure in those renters. We've added about 9,536 new multifamily units in the last year, while we've only absorbed about 7,510. That's what's keeping that occupancy rate below 87%. When we look at the Judson region for the multifamily overview, we've got 260 multifamily units that are under construction. That's the purple circle. So the purple circle represents the apartment under construction. The turquoise circles represent the multifamily projects that are in the planning stages. We have 900 future multifamily units that are in the planning stages. The 2902 is 268 units that are under construction. It's in the Olympia Elementary Attendance Zone. The groundwork started back in March. Construction went vertical in July. We estimate they'll be leasing possibly mid to 26, summertime 2026 is when they could start leasing some of the units next summer. Now I want to touch on the enrollment picture for the state of Texas. This is a map that is illustrating the one-year enrollment change for school districts across Texas. You'll notice that the beige colored school districts, which is a majority of the school districts, saw declining enrollments. The gold school districts saw enrollment decline between 500 and 1,000 students, and the orange school districts saw enrollment declines greater than 1,000. You can see it's concentrated in the urban and suburban school districts around the major cities in Texas that saw the greatest enrollment decline. Now, one of the things I want to point out here is that prior to the pandemic, the state enrollment was growing between 30 and 60,000 kids per year. Of course, the pandemic saw the big enrollment drop of 122,000 kids across the state, and this happened all across the country. And then we saw a little bit of a bounce back in 21, and in the 22 school year, the bounce in enrollment growth was back up to over 90,000 kids. But then over the last 2 years, between 2023 and the 24 school year, our enrollment only grew 12,723 and about 13,000 students in 2024. Now keep in mind, we were still the fastest growing state in the country. Our population growth very strong. We should have seen school enrollment growing in that 30 to 40,000 range. What we believe is already happening is the continued expansion of choice into charter schools, virtual schools, homeschooling. That is what is eroding the enrollment in our public schools across Texas. When we look specifically at Region 20, I've outlined the Judson School District in red, and the gold school districts are seeing declining enrollments. A majority of the school districts in Region 20 experiencing declining enrollment. And you can see in Region 20, that 5-year decrease is about 14,694 students. Now, a lot of that has gone into charter schools in Region 20. When we look at the TEA transfer patterns,
no, not that one. I mean, if you really, appreciate you, man. This on? This one real quick. If you were to be able to get close enough to a monitor where you could make this out, he said he outlined Judson in red. You can't really see it, it's in the background. But basically, what you see here is all the yellow is where you're seeing decreases in enrollment, but the blues are where you're seeing the increase. So Southwest, Natalia, Somerset, Southside, Bernie, Comal, New Braunfels, Navarro, that's where you're seeing the increase. Everywhere else is going down. Now on the next slide, which is, there you go. You're gonna have to actually, to make out the numbers, probably get closer to a screen. As you look down here, you'll look at 24, 25, and it shows where most of the students have gone to in the district. Up top is where we're receiving kids. So if you're looking at East Central and Northeast, you see that East Central received 328, Northeast about 402, and we're bringing in more from those districts than we're sending over. In North Side, you see some of the lower numbers. When you come down here, and you can see the numbers that are actually transferring out of the district, ideas at 2,272. So 2,272. It doesn't help that idea set that school up right off of Ben Zingelman and
they knew what they were
15,
doing.
16, yeah. So, but in some of the other areas, if you wanted to specialize in science and technology, they're at like 623. Great Hearts is about 564, and we see some leak into the local surrounding Air Force bases, but that's kind of why you know, if you move close to the base, you kind of want your kids to go there. So Fort Sam and Randolph. But you can see the biggest is the 2,272 from IDEA. But it's important to know where the students are transferring to. Now what you're gonna see on this list is a bunch of Fort Stocktons and Compass Rose Public School. There was another one on here. Hallettsville, ISD. Which one? Roscoe. Roscoe's, well, Roscoe, yes. I was gonna say Roscoe's student. But that's in Loveland. So that means our students are, how you doing? That means our students are going into the virtual program in a district that far away. Does that make sense? So they're starting to participate in those virtual programs away from the district as well. It's just that this is a really important slide. It was really important for you guys to see where the numbers are kind of going. I'll let him finish.
outlined in turquoise shows the numbers of students that live outside the district's boundaries that are transferring in, and you can see a pretty dramatic change. Back in 2019, we had about 210 students transferring in. In the 24-25 year, that number has climbed to about 1,117, which is a 5-year change of over 900 students. Now, the table that's outlined in light purple represents the students that are transferring out of the district to either charter schools or surrounding school districts. And you'll also notice those that are transferring to the virtual programs. So back in 2019, we had about 4,048 students transferring out. That number has increased to 6,848 students transferring out during the 24-25 school year. This year's transfer data will become available in March of 26. So we've got a few months before we can see how this year's transfer numbers turned out. But again, what you'll notice is the charter schools. IDEA has about 2,272 students that are transferring from the district into the IDEA schools. Then you've got another high concentration going into Great Hearts with 564 students transferring there. You've got 623 students transferring to the School of Science and Technology. And then you've got another high concentration that are into the George Gervin Academy. The charter schools do make up the largest number of students that are transferring out. Now you'll also again spot these virtual programs. So the Hallsville, which is in that East Texas area, in the 24-25 year, they had 202 students from within Judson transferring or attending the Hallsville program. You've got the Fort Stockton in West Texas virtual program of 92 students. So again, it's a concentration of charter transfers, virtual, and then transferring to the surrounding school districts. That would be where you see the Northeast ISD, 272 students, Randolph Field, 329, San Antonio ISD, 427. Now, I've touched on the charter school enrollments, but you can see how year over year, the charter school enrollments are increasing anywhere from 11,000 students per year. In the previous school year, the increase in charter enrollment was 12,795. Each year, they continue to open more and more charters, which is causing that charter school enrollment to continue to increase. In the San Antonio region, we've got 130 charter schools operating that account for about 57,000 students. That was a rise of nearly 1,000 students this past year. This past year, we had 5 separate charters begin operating or reporting in the 24-25 year. Now, looking at the charters that are either in the planning stages or opening for this school year, we're tracking 10 new charters. The turquoise circles are the charters that are under construction. The purple circle charters have had an application that was approved, so they'll likely be another couple of years before they open. But you can see that close to the Judson School District, we've got the Newman International Academy just to the west of the school district, and that the application is in process, so it'll be a couple of years before it opens. But most of the charters that are opening or under construction for this year are more in the center area, located in Northeast ISD. Several in Northeast that will be opening over the next couple of years. I want to touch on the homeschool enrollment. Homeschool enrollment is a little challenging to track because there are not any requirements to report to any of the state education agencies, TEA. But across the country, one estimate is that we've got about 4.3 to 4.2 million kids that are participating in homeschool education. When we break that down and look at the homeschool data by state, of course, California has the highest amount of homeschool enrolled kids, but Texas is second. Now, the Admission League resource is using census data, and their estimate is that in Texas, we've got about 430,000 kids that could be attending homeschool in Texas. When we look at the other kind of hybrid off of homeschooling is microschooling. Microschooling is growing at a tremendous rate. VELA is an education foundation that helps to fund micro schools. They recruit founders. These founders have the creativity or the flexibility to create whatever type of micro school that they wish to create. But these micro schools can be hybrid, they can be homeschool based, they could be a virtual, they could be learning co-ops. There's no set definition of what a micro school is, other than that it's a smaller group of students that have either a very small limited staff. They tend to be in sizes of 100 to 150 students, but it is growing at a tremendous rate. because of these education foundations that are really bent on funding and expanding the micro school form of education. Now, wanting to look briefly at your enrollment history in Judson ISD. This table is showing you the grade level enrollment for the last 5 years. You can see that prior to 2023, we did see enrollment growth, but that was mostly driven by the expansion of the pre-K program. That pre-K expansion likely led to additional kids in all the elementary grade levels. As you can see, back in 2022, Judson ISD's enrollment was at about 25,871, and then the district changed the programming for pre-K, which did result in a dramatic drop in the pre-K and elementary enrollments. We saw a decrease of about 2,000 students in the 23-24 year. Last year, we had a decrease of about 300 students. This year, the drop in enrollment is around 849 students. We do look at the cohort patterns. So the cohort patterns do give us a glimpse of what happened by grade level. And you can see the kindergarten class has seen pretty dramatic drops in their cohort over the last 3 years. And the kindergarten number is a very important number as how it affects the later grade levels. So when you have a smaller kindergarten class, it does affect what will happen in the future with those other elementary classes and eventually what happens in middle school and high school. Now, when we look at what I'm calling our mid-level forecast, our mid-level forecast, in my view now, may be a little optimistic. It does show a decline of about 159 students next year. And under this mid-level forecast, the enrollment could get to about 22,991 students in 5 years. It's not quite back to where it was, 4 years ago. I don't know that we're ever going to get back to that level that we saw in 2022. But under a mid-level forecast, you could get to about 22,991 students in 5 years. At the campus level, we are looking at the maximum capacity. So the maximum capacity assumes you have 22 students in every regular classroom. And you can see with the maximum capacity number, we've got about 18,260 seats of capacity with enrollment of about 11,099 students. And we've kind of layered in 2 new columns that represent the utilization rates for the campuses. So based on this 11,099 enrollment and the 18,260 capacity, your district average elementary utilization is at 61%. So
real quick on this one, there's been a lot of back and forth on the capacities. We were using functional capacity at one time, but then there was talk of that we should use the max capacities for our campuses. And so I had a report earlier that we then got back with our demographer and had him redo the numbers with the max capacity. And as I'm looking at it, there's a couple on here that need to be adjusted, but suffice it to say that even with our adjustments, we're going to show that our utilization rate for several of our campuses is pretty low. And so with that, that's why we're going to have to look at consolidating some campuses. And so we're going to have to determine what campuses we're going to consolidate and what type of criteria are we going to use to identify those campuses. So I just wanted to point out that that is something that we're looking at, and we'll have our, make sure that we clean this up a bit more than what we originally showed. Yes, sir.
I may have missed it, but why go from functional to max capacity?
So a school is built with a certain number of classrooms in that school. If you shove all of the kids in at, let's say, the middle school.
Better word.
Okay, if you assign all students in every classroom that school is built for, say a middle school at 24 students per classroom, you're gonna have a pretty big school. And so one of the thoughts is that you, as a functional capacity, when our the company that did the facility assessment, they went off of I think it was like an 85% capacity of the campus, and to use that as your capacity for the school. But there's been some conversation that we should go with the max capacity for the school to show what our true utilization rate is for those campuses. So that's what we're trying to do, is show the true utilization rate based on max capacity. Good? Gotcha.
Can I add just something?
Sure.
The way I like to think about it, maximum capacity is a very easy concept to explain. Like, in other words, no matter what, we're not putting any more than this number of kids into the school. Whereas functional is very nuanced. So I think it's a little easier to understand maximum capacity.
Can you say that again louder?
Yes, so the
Sorry.
concept of maximum capacity is a little bit easier to explain to the greatest number of people, in my opinion, right? In other words, maximum capacity is saying, I don't care what your programmatic desires are, what you're gonna do 5 years from now, you're not putting any more than this number of kids in this campus. Whereas functional capacity is very nuanced, because it also looks at like, how many parking spaces do you have? Do you have the appropriate size cafeteria? Do you have enough custodian rooms? Those are concepts that are associated with functional capacity. Maximum capacity is just boom, it's one number.
And the board has approved, the board goal, if you look at our balanced scorecard, is 80 to 90% capacity. So that's why we have to know, the board has to know what the capacity of the school is, because we have established the goal of 80 to 90. So 80% means 1 out of every 5 classrooms will be empty and available for the principals to use as they see fit in their classrooms. So that's why the board needs those numbers, because we've already established those goals 2 years ago.
That's what I was trying to understand, is what was driving the conversation going from focus or a functional capacity to max capacity, not the difference.
The
between
board's
the
goal
two.
is you all get to 80. That's what the board has set out and approved, is get to 80% of whatever that max number is what the goal is.
If I can help. Your question was, what's the difference between functional and?
No, not what the difference is. What is driving the conversation moving from functional to max?
In our effort to say we're gonna consolidate, we wanna look at what's the max capacity of students that you can put at that. Before we were looking at functional capacity, because we have principals in the room. If you were to go to Terry Combs and say, hey, we've got a capacity here at Hopkins of 1,100 students, she'd probably say, we haven't seen 1,100 students since we had 16 portables on here. But we could make that happen if needed, so we're looking at max capacity. If you were to go to Candlewood, they've got the Eagle store over at that campus, which is one of the classrooms that could be used. Max capacity means we'd have to move out the Eagle store and then move students into that classroom. So it's about the maximum number of students that we can put on.
Which the board has never, ever said, fill that campus to 100%. Absolutely not. Go check our balanced scorecard on the district website. 80% is the goal. So that at Candlewood, plenty, 1 out of every 5 classrooms empty. For Eagle Bugs, they have an art room. Candlewood's has used some of their spaces very amazingly for that. So we do want to preserve that for our principals.
So that was it, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Go ahead, buddy.
Organization that would have to come through campus zone consolidations and rezoning, but we would need to reduce this capacity anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 seats in order to get this utilization rate in that 70 to 80% range. Now, your master's elementary is at capacity, so that enrollment this October, this fall, is at 691, so it's right on its capacity. That zone does still have some housing growth, so that's what's lifting that enrollment up to about 757 students in 5 years. You've got pretty significant availability in your other campuses. So there is this, the district would benefit from some rezoning and some consolidations in order to get your utilization rate in that 70 to 80% range. At the secondary level, with the max capacity, the total capacity for middle schools is at 9,120. So you can see our current utilization is at 52%. In 3 years, the utilization rate can be at about 55%. Because these buildings are much larger, when you take one of these or two of these offline, 1 to 2 schools would raise that middle school capacity anywhere from 20 to 30%. At the high school level, your Judson Early College Academy is right at capacity. But when we look at total capacity, total max capacity for your high schools, it's at about 7,982. The fall enrollment is 6,783. That puts us at about 85% capacity right now. And in 3 years, it could be at about 82%. So I don't recommend a reduction of high schools. You may want to look at how the capacity is configured, but because they have such large capacity, high numbers of capacity, taking one of those offline would not really be feasible because it would put you at or over capacity. Now we have included 3 sets of projections. So I've shown you the mid forecast, which is this 22,991 students in 5 years. We do have a low forecast. The low forecast has your enrollment declining to about 21,114. We've got a high forecast, which is optimistic, at about 23,905. Just to give you some of the parameters around these different forecast models, the low range projection, there's uncertainty in the economic conditions. We could see a downturn in the job market, slowdown in the housing and the starts, increase in homeschooling and private school enrollments, lower kindergarten numbers, and the lower, which would affect the elementary grade level numbers. I feel like there will be years where we have low numbers. So we almost need to plan from a conservative position around the lower numbers, at least for the short term. There's a lot of uncertainty with the voucher program that's going to go into effect during the 26-27 school year. So I'm leaning towards a lower forecast model, and we have included the lower forecast as an addendum to this report. The mid-level forecast, I also think, there may be a year or two where the enrollment does bounce positive. So there is, I don't know that we're going to see a scenario where it trends low every year for 5 years, but we could see a year or two where it's performing at a low model and then bounces to a mid. But because of the uncertainty with vouchers and the expansion of school choice, right now I would encourage our clients to look at the low and the mids for where to do your planning. So key takeaways. Statewide enrollment patterns are turning negative due to the expansion of school choice and the lower birth rates. Fall 2025 enrollment likely to be near 22,500 students. That's actually the fall of 26. The low growth scenario could put your enrollment near 21,100 students in 5 years. The district should plan from a conservative position and may need to look at school consolidations to improve your utilization rates. Consolidating 3 to 5 elementary schools would improve your utilization rates between 10 to 20% across the district. Consolidating 1 to 2 middle schools would improve the utilization rates between 15 to 30%. So both the elementary consolidations and the middle school, if you were to make some of those decisions, it could get your average utilization rate somewhere between 70 to 80%. High school capacity should be reevaluated and adjusted to meet your enrollment needs. High school consolidations are not recommended as it would put your enrollment at capacity. Well, I've included the additional projections for your review. Let me know if you have any other questions, and look forward to providing some additional help when needed.
All right, so that's the demographic presentation, and we can leave that up right there. If you notice, he's saying that he's recommending a consolidation of 3 to 5 elementary schools and 1 to 2 middle schools. I can tell you that in talking with the cabinet, we can comfortably recommend that we consolidate 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school at this time. Let that consolidation settle to see where we are at that point, and then if we need to come back to look at possibility of consolidating any more elementary schools, then that's something that we can reevaluate. But to jump right out at a 3 to 5, we don't believe that that's feasible at this point. So again, 2 elementary schools we're comfortable with recommending, and then 1 middle school we're comfortable with recommending for consolidation for next school year, the start of next school year. Okay? Any questions on the presentation? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, can we maybe have the slides for like the 10-year forecast?
Yes, we will send.
No, I mean, I have a question on that one.
Oh, gotcha.
She'd like you to go back.
Go back to the slide,
Yes.
gotcha, understood. It was,
That's all the screen.
on the middle.
I see Kitty Hawk goes.
Keep going. No, keep going back.
It's towards the end.
Are you guys talking about the capacity elementary?
So that,
She's asking Kitty Hawk, no?
Oh, which, did you want elementary or middle?
Those ones right there.
Mm-hmm.
Cause as I've been attending the growth and planning, isn't it supposed to be like whatever the column for capacity should be consistent? Cause it looks like it's not the same as what I have from two years ago and last year. So does it mean that, isn't it supposed to be that capacity is always consistent so that we know if we're reaching the maximum or not?
Yes, I can tell you that was the gentleman's question earlier. What Ms. Lee is saying is that if you look over here under max capacity, for Metzger it says about 1224, Cibolo Creek 1152.
Because it seems like every campuses really went high.
I'm-
Just like Jackson right now, it
Yes.
says 3,300 2 years ago and last year, but it came down to 2,600, so what does that mean?
That's what the gentleman asked earlier. So what he was saying is, why did we move from functional capacity to maximum capacity? And what we're trying to explain is that we were asked to determine how many students can we put at that campus. So when you go to Judson Middle School, which was built for a subset of Judson High School, the great campus, if you were to clear out all the clear out all the classes, then in its heyday, you could put about 2,100
So we've been using not the functional capacity then?
We
for
have
over
been
the
using
last 2
functional
years?
capacity. We have been using functional.
Then that's my question, why is it not consistent though? Because then the data would be changing from what the orange would be for our capacity that we have students right now, wouldn't it be?
There was a request made for us to look at max capacity. So this is the max capacity. And what we usually say for middle school is that we build them to house about 1,250 students. But when the request was made for max capacity, what we did was we went to the campus, talked to the principals and said, look, any classroom that we can use here, and at 24 students in a classroom, what do we come to at the middle school? And these are the numbers that came out. Now, we have to do some shifts in terms of what's in some of those classrooms right now. A lot There are some vacant rooms over at Judson Middle.
Because that was made as a high school.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think that needs to be in that data, because that's skewed. If you look at those numbers, that's definitely skewed, because that was a high school. I went there for high school, that's the great campus. So the other middle schools were made as a middle school, but that's a high school. So that's definitely skewed data there.
I can't.
That's the number of classrooms times 24 kids.
Well, but what she's
Is
trying,
what's on there now, right?
I think what she's trying to say is that at a middle school, that seems a little bit large for a number of middle schools.
Yes, we would, correct, we would never, nobody designed middle schools that big.
But if we're looking at max capacity, and we're saying that this is the availability that we have, then that's what we're saying could go to.
True, if you go all the way across, where you're
And we're
saying that
looking
the
at
utilization,
percentages,
and-
right.
and that's unfair to Judson Middle School. Because
I-
that's not made as a middle school.
I can't say that I don't understand what you're talking about.
So,
That makes sense.
um,
Yes, ma'am.
you get what I'm saying?
I do
Okay.
get what you're saying.
Okay.
I would also tell you, having been a principal, almost 2,500 kids in a middle school is a lot,
It is.
to say the least.
Right.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that number including like the space of the B building?
Yes,
which we
ma'am.
don't use?
Behind the cafeteria, all that. Yes, ma'am.
So from now on until the future, we'll be using these numbers for
Unless
like-
we get a request to go back to functional capacity. This is the max capacity. Yes, ma'am.
Over here, Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Who, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it the board that gave the admin the directive to go more towards maximum capacity versus functional? Is that why we are now seeing, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying. So I could have sworn that the directive was given by the board to the administration to focus on maximum capacity. Am I incorrect in watching that meeting?
I can't disagree with that statement.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, cause I remember back here, when the demographers are here, they're discussing like how efficient of each campus, that's why they were changing the numbers. So I'm,
They were talking about the long-term functional capacities on that one, right, where they were like, oh, the
yes, cause right,
effective ages.
cause I remember really, like, even like the numbers itself, it tells that not, like, most of our schools, not really majority, but some of them are not really efficiently, using.
And the data was all over the place too. For example, like on previous slides, you see Candlewood has put at like 600 capacity, even though the building holds 1,200. But other schools like Wortham, they had your capacity at 850. Well, only if you give up your science labs or you get an 850 into Wortham. So those numbers were just all over the place. So that's why the board approved, paid lots of money. There are literal blueprints of every single campus, and every classroom is annotated to 500-page documents that allow not just walking into the campus. You can see every blue classroom meets educational specifications of the Texas Education Code, so many square feet per kid, right, type thing, and can fit 24 students or 22 in the elementary. And so that's why that document was created this summer from these engineers and architects, so that we could have those capacity numbers in order to measure it against what the board goal was.
And the board goal,
Was 80% of capacity is what it was set at in October of 2020.
and say.
80% of capacity, and back then we were doing functional capacity. So for the room, and back then we were doing functional capacity, and that's what we had done. We came back as of late, and now we're doing max capacity. So what I'm hearing from the committee, from the group is this, that we would like to look at what's appropriate, that we could make a recommendation to the board from this committee on how many should be at a middle school, how many should be at an elementary. That's something that we could entertain as well. This is the Growth and Planning Committee where we come back to this committee and then get recommendations to go to them. Does that make sense? Because if there needs to be consistency on how many we want at each elementary campus, or how many we want at each middle school campus, or what's the maximum, then we could put that down and make it a recommendation to the board as well. Not to say that they have to accept that, but that's what we could do. Yes, ma'am?
Within all those, you're looking at the room numbers in 22, but are y'all taking into account the special education classes? that
Not
you-
at all.
Okay. so
We're looking at all the rooms with,
With just total
the numbers of
22, but not
students,
the
yes.
type of programs. that
and
we
there's a
have.
lot of specialties, like, what Ms. Bedford just brought up is that if you go to a campus, you've got RTI, you've got special ed, you've got a bunch of different what was some of the others? Dyslexia, a bunch of different classes. Now, to Ms. Ryan's point though, we're not talking about 100% capacity in terms of what we had said we were going to place at the campus. We said only 80%.
Is a
One
max.
out of every
That
class.
that would leave room for some of those specialty classes
Okay.
to be occupied as well.
And those numbers don't count art rooms or your technology rooms, like none of those are counted in those capacities from the, architects.
Yes.
So, like, William as an example, as an art room, 2 science labs,
We don't have to go through.
like,
all
those
of
are
them.
not in those capacity numbers, those are not counted as classrooms.
Yes, ma'am.
For the peons in the room who are still confused, that would be me. When we say 80% capacity, are we trying to have like a range, like we're gonna have each school be somewhere between 60 and 80%? Or are we saying 80 is the max, are we saying 80 is the minimum? I'm confused. What are
We're
we
saying that we would like to see the campuses that enrolled at 80%.
Okay.
What Ms. Lee was trying to communicate is that right here, you see 2160 at the Gray campus or Jacksonville. But then you'll see about 1224 at Metzger Middle School or 1152 at Cibolo Creek. And we know that those are the newer campuses and pretty big. But if we're saying that this is how we're calculating what we want to be 80% of,
Right.
then that gives the impression that we need to move another 900 kids into Judson Middle. And what I'm hearing from the Growth and Planning Committee is that just doesn't seem feasible when it comes to the numbers that should be at a middle school. Yes? No?
Yeah, so
And-
you're gonna look at comparison and apples to apples. You cannot say you 35% utilization, we must close it because it's not in capacity. It's not
Yeah,
designed
that's
for
the
that.
average for most
So if you're going to statistically look at data and say, a middle school can hold this, then you should say a maximum capacity, if we're gonna say an average would be 1250, then you should combine Judson Middle to 1250. And you have to be looking at,
Right.
again,
To your point, Sarah,
Yeah,
you
thank
asked-
you. Sorry.
her question was.
It just gives
what-
the idea.
What's the average for middle school? I can tell you that as a facilities team and having worked in operations, we plan for about 1250 at each middle school.
Okay.
Now, some schools went big. There was a heyday when Kitty Hawk was bumping up against 1500. But that's when we said we had to do some expansions and all the others.
Dr. Fields, hold on.
Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am. I apologize.
I don't wanna beat a dead horse. but
Thank
why
you
are
so
we-
much.
Why are we looking at max capacity if that includes removing things like science rooms or special education or dyslexia? Like, why would we even look at that as an option if we're not gonna use it in the first place? Why would we just look at 80% to 90% capacity as 100% capacity?
And that's, her question was, why would we look at max capacity if there's so many other variables that go into effect on how you're going to utilize the classroom? That's why my question to the group was, maybe we should be making a recommendation to the board that states, hey, we think this is the number of students that should be at middle school.
Yeah.
This is the number of students that should be at an elementary. This is the maximum number of students that we feel should be at a high school, and let's start making our capacities based on that.
I agree.
But if we go by the square footage alone, then we'll find that there'll be some schools that have double the number of students that another school has based on square footage alone, and maybe that's not how we want to staff or run the schools in the district. We want consistency throughout. So all those who feel like this is something that we need to get to as we move through this process, please raise your hand. The even numbers of students at all the campuses based on elementary, middle, and high.
Does what?
Okay, let me say it one more time.
Ask it again. Real talk.
One more time. What I heard from the group is that there should be a number of elementary students at every campus, no more than 750, 800, or 900, whatever that number is, rather than the square footage that comes along with that facility. At middle school, there should be no more than maybe 1,250 or 1,300 at that campus rather than the square footage at that campus. And there should be no more than 3,000 or whatever it is at the high schools, regardless of the square footage at that campus.
Agreed.
If that's what you think we should be coming together and coming up with a number on, please raise your hand. And then we can make that recommendation to the board. Conversely, if you feel like we should be putting the number of students in a campus that can fit in that campus, regardless of whether it's double the number at this campus and single at the other campus, raise your hands. Okay, I'm not getting a lot of hands.
So
That's common sense.
They
We all
agree.
Common sense.
We all want kids in closets, no.
Well, I have a question. So, because how you stated, so like Escondido's totally different than say Park Village and the amount of kids. So if you put 800 at Park Village, that's gonna look totally different than 800 at Copperfield.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, but if you do it by the square footage, then that goes back to the other question about the different specialties
Go
that we
back
have at our
to that.
campuses as well. So
Okay.
that's why
Go back.
it's hard to raise my hand for either or, because 800 at this school is gonna look totally different than 800 at Copperfield.
I understand what you're saying, Ms. Beckford, but I want you to pay attention to what we've got going on up here. So if you were to go to Park Village, it says 990 students can fit in that.
That's not including the
What
special
I'm
units we
saying
have.
is, should we come up with 750 is what should be at elementary across the board for 800? Or should we go 990 here and then at Friends 704?
So
Or
you're saying standardize.
we need to standardize the capacity across, that's what I'm asking. Should we do that recommendation, or should we just move on? Because I feel like I'm talking to you.
I said move on. No, I'm just kidding. Just move on.
Yes, sir.
If I,
Then- all
if I
right.
may, sir, is there an option C? We've heard those ideas, right? We have a uniform number of here's the capacity, but
Per
according
campus.
to facility usage and availability, knowing the populations you have at that campus, I need X amount of certain room numbers. Right,
See,
so that
that's
we can't
the
say that it's gonna be this
That was
number.
the functional capacity that we moved away.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That was the functional capacity. Where we went to a campus and said, based on this campus and this size, we think that you should be here, we moved away from it.
So what happened was, for these numbers, I got with facilities, they sent me a document that showed the campuses and how many classrooms are at those campuses. I took those classroom numbers, if it's a middle school, say it was 53 classrooms. I went 53 times 24, got a number, put it on there. Did that for every other school. So that's how we got to these numbers.
Max.
Okay,
Capacity,
max
that's how
numbers.
we got to max.
Doesn't take into account RTI, doesn't take into account dyslexia or any of that. We just multiplied the numbers, the classroom numbers, times 22 or times 24 or times 26 for high school. That's what I did.
Well, regardless of how we got to max, I think the concern is either we go look at a functional capacity for each campus, or we come up with a standard number regardless for each elementary, and each middle, and each high. I'm hearing functional capacity makes the most sense. Can I get hands for functional capacity? Got you so much, thank you. A
So
few
how are we
more-
gonna find that? So Candlewood's down to 600 then, of the 1,200, and so we're gonna go off of, we're only gonna fill Candlewood to 70% of 600 and have 2/3 of the school empty?
I
I was trying to
think
figure out,
what-
that's what the board, that's what
What
the
I'm
group
hearing
is
is,
recommending?
they're not recommending anything yet.
Oh.
We just said that we were gonna go back as a group, come up with a recommendation for the board, and then that's what we'll bring to the board. And then it'll be up to the board on whether or not they wanna accept that or reject it, based on the numbers that this committee comes up with.
How's
But
functional capacity gonna be defined? Just whatever the principal wants?
again, that's what we will sit as a group and come up with. It won't be about what the principal wants, but I'm sure the principal would wanna have some input as to what they think would be the appropriate number as well, along with the people in the room. And then we'll come up with the criteria on how we'll bring that back to you.
I think Stephanie had a.
There was a bunch of hands, I know there was one over here, yes, ma'am.
Could it not do something like a certain percentage to?
certain percentage of max capacity? Cause I think like, if we do a straight number, or the same number straight across, like, all campuses don't work the same. That's like giving a Band-Aid for a paper cut and giving a Band-Aid for a broken arm, like it doesn't make
You're absolutely
sense,
correct.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
So are the only options max capacity and functional, or could we say like, it sounds like we have done like 80 to 90% of functional, could we just say like a blank percentage of max? Like, if y'all are wanting to work with maximum capacity?
I think what we heard from the group is that we're gonna have to sit down and come up with that criteria on exactly how we put that together, whether it's off of max capacity or whether it's functional capacity. But once we come up with the criteria, then that will be one of the recommendations that we make to the board. So that makes sense, yes. Yes, sir, quickly.
Dr. Fields, I just wanted to volunteer some information. So, I know, for example, Converse Elementary was designed for a 750 capacity. Now, if we had to push the envelope, the infrastructure, the cafeteria, all of those rooms, extra rooms, can go up to 800. So, when we're doing this, going through the motions of trying to figure out the criteria, we're also going to have to look at the infrastructure as well.
Yeah.
Because 858 may be pushing the envelope for Congress.
So basically what Ruben is trying to say is this, and the principal will get this straight. If you put too many kids at a campus, the library doesn't get any bigger, the cafeteria doesn't get any bigger. And when you try and run those students through lunch or in the library, it can't hold because that's too many kids at the campus. So some of the common areas just aren't built for that level. Kind of like Kitty Hawk. You can go over there, but that cafeteria is not as big as St. Little Creek's cafeteria. So those are some of the things that we'll have to keep in mind as well.
Hey, Dr. Fields, do we have the, I know what Ruben's talking about. If the educational specifications, I mean, maybe it was built 50 years ago, we might not, right? But all of our recent builds in the last 20 years, we have the educational specifications that were approved by the board. So for example, Wortham, Escondido, Copperfield, and what's the fourth one that's the same, Rolling Meadows, right? Those were all designed to hold 750 students, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There's an overflow capacity, but that's not what it was designed for. So if we have those numbers, it's well designed to hold 750 students, and you got your art rooms, your science labs, you still have your PTA room, you still have all those ancillary rooms, the life skills room, all of that is all accounted for in the educational specifications. And I'm guessing we have at least 20 years, Ruben?
Yes.
Anything built in the last 20, maybe even longer? Maybe 20, I'll give you 20, right? So more than half our schools, we have
Yes.
that data.
Yes.
And that was
Which is the functional capacity.
That's the functional
So the
capacity.
functional capacity of Wortham is 750, Escondido, Copperfield,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
what the.
You are absolutely correct. But when we look at max capacity, which was requested of us, now you see numbers like 880, 858, it's bigger than what the school was really built.
Well, maybe we didn't understand. Max. Max is not max. Max is educational specification. What was the school design? Every classroom used as a classroom. That doesn't count taking a non-classroom and turning it into a classroom. That's not capacity.
I'm the reason why Ruben and I are saying the same thing is because since 2014, we've been building the same school.
Yes.
I work in operations,
Yes.
so I know
Yes.
elementaries were built for 750. Middle schools were built for 1250. And our high schools were typically built for 2400, except for Judson, which was built for a little bit bigger.
Well, and I would assume that then 750 would be the max capacity of an elementary school. That's what it was built for, that's max capacity.
So that's the numbers we had before, but we were asked for.
Where'd the max capacity number come from? Like, if we cram people in there,
No, like I emailed and said this is supposed to be 750 because I knew what the specs were. So.
Gotcha, yes ma'am. So we know that we're gonna make that recommendation to the board as we move forward. Yes, ma'am.
So, it's a long time ago, but when I started in the district, I taught at Candlewood Elementary, and back at that time, we had 6th grade in elementary. And before ELOF opened, we had 1,200 students at Candlewood Elementary. And so, it was almost impossible to be there, because we didn't have cafeteria space, There's 2 sets of bathrooms. Can you imagine 1,200 kids with 2 sets of one on each of the buildings? So when we talk about functional capacity, that's the kind of thing that needs to be taken into account, is do we have the infrastructure, just like you were saying, to manage all of that? Our older schools don't have parking space for programs and things like that. So all of that has to come into play, and you can't just put, okay, we're gonna put 880 kids at Candlewood, because it's really not built for that, it's not designed for that. So there's a whole lot more nuance to this that I think we need lots of different numbers to look at, and people to really put their minds to what is best at each campus, and it's not necessarily the same across the district. It can't be, our buildings aren't all the same.
Well, thank you guys so much. I don't want to keep you here all night. There is some other stuff that we need to go over before you leave. And that is, we've looked at the criteria. We can see that there's most likely going to be a recommendation for consolidation at middle school and recommendation for consolidation at 2 elementary. So there are several different things that Mr. Brooks has come up with that need to be looked at. What we're looking for tonight is recommendations from this committee on something else that we may have left out. And know that when we come back the next time, we'll have each of the schools on the wall, and we'll be putting dots on there to say, hey, these are recommendations based on the criteria that we're showing. He can get into some of the criteria right now. You ready? Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, some of the things that we're going to be looking at, and as he said, we'll be asking you what you think are some additional things that we may not have identified. First thing, obviously, we just talk about capacity ad nauseam. Also, utilization rate or utilization percentage of the campuses. We had a facility assessment conducted by 2 companies, RBK and Corgan. And what you see on the screen right there is an overview of the facility assessment. Now, what the companies did was they went to all of our campuses and they did a full inspection of everything on those campuses, each campus. And as they identified things that needed to be repaired, replaced, upgraded, whatever we want to say about it, they prioritized those things into these areas. Priority 1 in red is, hey, you guys need to address these items now. Priority 1, 190, the construction estimate, just the construction estimate. This doesn't include soft costs and other things that Ruben and the facilities team would be adding to that. But priority 1, again, these are things across the district at every school that you need to address now. $252 million of priority 1 items that need to be addressed. Priority 2, if you could click on the priority 1, what are some of those things? We won't go through all of them, but these are some of the things that they found at some of the campuses. If you scroll, Converse, all of those are the different types of things that they found at these different campuses that need to be addressed for priority 1s. So one of the criteria that we're going to use in identifying what schools we want to start considering for consolidation is how much is it going to cost to bring that school up to par for priority 1, for priority 2. And again, that's priority 1 is just one. If we go back to priority 2 overview. Priority 2s, these are things that you guys need to look at in the next 3 to 5 years to be replaced, repaired, upgrade. And then priority 3s, greater than 5 years, things that at some point y'all need to address these things. So a total amount of $380 million of just construction costs, again, not taking into account our soft costs and different things like that would probably push that number up even higher. But just like priority 1, the priority 2 and 3s have listings for each of those campuses. And so if we looked at just priority 1 for a particular campus, how much does it cost for just priority 1 at a campus? or just, you know, or all three, priority 1, 2, and 3, how much total do we need to spend on that school? And then we need to decide, based on that amount, do we think it's a good idea to spend that amount of money to bring a school up to par, or should we consider that school for consolidation? Again, enrollment, projected enrollment, again, the facility assessment survey, costs, utility costs, how much does it cost to keep that school running? Those are some of the things that we'll be looking at as items, but again, I wanna ask you guys, what are some of the other things that you might think we need to look at as we're considering consolidating campuses? What are some of the other things that you would suggest? That's an open question. Just spitball. Trying to get you out of here.
Can you put the list up there so they can see where we are currently?
Which list?
The one that had the amount that it costs to run the campus, the amount that, the overall list, the priority one, and the other one.
Are we able to get a copy of this?
Well, this, we want to, all right, we want to be careful. Everybody knows what happened when we came up with the recommendation for closing Cornell, correct? So we want everyone to go through the criteria as a group, and then we make a recommendation to the board based on the criteria that Mr. Brooks just talked about. If we were to just post this on the website, what do you think people would do? They would just disaggregate it for themselves without context and say, this is what they're gonna come up with. Does that make sense? We're not trying to hide anything. We're just trying to make a structured recommendation to the board. That way it doesn't look like we're just picking people off of a random put together, and then these are the campuses that are going to be closed. Because it's gonna be sensitive to every neighborhood, correct? So I really just don't wanna, I want this group to be responsible for that, and I wanna put up this PowerPoint so you guys can see. We've done a lot of the disaggregation when it comes to, this is how much it costs for utilities at each of your campuses.
Could it maybe, if you don't wanna share it out, could it be maybe available for people on the committee to come to the district office and look at? Cause I'm just thinking if at our next meeting, we're gonna be asked to make a recommendation, personally, I wanna make sure I give it some time to like look through and it doesn't feel rushed, because like you said,
I
it's
agree.
important
That makes a lot of sense.
to people.
So,
So if you're worried about it getting
how can
on
we do that?
whatever, or can,
I would just ask you guys respectfully.
Just, so these remember, we still have two other bond programs, three other bond programs. So this is kind of a moving target, right? It's a snapshot in time. So we still have to check off the projects that have actually been completed since when this project was initiated.
right, it's a working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't wanna give it to you and then you say, aha, they just built this, how come it's still on the list?
Sure, no, I don't mean like that, I just mean
Yeah.
something so that, cause when we do come, we do just have an hour.
Gotcha.
And so to give it the time that it needs, because it is important to the neighborhoods and the staff and teachers and families
Yep.
that it doesn't,
I hear you, Steph. I just really wanna do this in a way where it's controlled and dignified. And we don't just put a bunch of stuff out there and make decisions. I'm like, what about a workshop on a Saturday? Where we come in on the Saturday and you guys can have more time than just a couple of hours after work in the middle of the week.
an optional something maybe would be nice, I mean, just if people want to, I mean, I know.
We're good with
I
it.
like.
And we're putting it up now. I'm sure that, you know, people are taking pictures. All I'm saying is up here. You can see, here's the years. Here's the years of renovation. Now everybody's taking a picture. Stop it. Here's the annual utilities. Here are the priorities for each of the campuses. Second priorities, third, and then total. So you can see that there's some campuses that there's going to be a considerable amount of work that's needed to upgrade. Some campuses that the utilities that it takes to run it are a little bit more than others. And then the age of some of the campuses, going back to 1969 on some. So those are all things that we're saying should be considered. Now what we're asking the group is, what's not on that list that we should be considering? Yes, ma'am.
So have you already shared a list of the criteria? Like we're looking at age, we're looking, just a list of that.
Tonight, we were supposed to come up with the criteria. We couldn't, because we spent a lot of time on
Okay,
the
so
max
you're
capacity.
developing that.
Right, we're saying this is what we came up with.
Okay.
Is there something that you don't see up there that we should be considering that we're not? Does that make sense? Any hands on that?
So call out the items that you.
Enrollment.
Is it the,
Enrollment, current enrollment, projected enrollment over the next 5 to 10 years that we had on the Marvin report.
The year built of the
Year build,
facility?
the facility assessment costs to upgrade the facility. So that's all 3 priorities added up for that campus.
do you include academic?
Annual utilities?
Level?
We are not considering academics when it comes to the consolidation of facilities. We are not looking at academics. We're looking at enrollment, we're looking at the facility assessment. I'm sorry?
What we're saying is conversely. If you have a campus, to Ms. Ryan's point, that's being underutilized, and they're scoring real well, we're not saying that we wouldn't consider that campus for consolidation if all of the other factors up there show that that campus is going to cost more to continue to operate than another campus. And we're not going to take a campus who's performing under and say because they're performing under, but all of the factors up there show that it's a viable campus to say, this is the one we need to close down based on its academic performance. That's when we say we're not letting that be a driver. If you guys are saying you feel like the recommendation should be that way, we just don't want it out there that we're keeping campuses open because they performed well, or we're looking to close campuses because they didn't perform well, because that's not a criteria that we would base such an important decision.
How about transportation costs, is that significant enough?
Excellent point, yes, sir, definitely. Transportation too, that we can put that down.
What about proximity to the other schools?
Definitely, proximity to the other schools.
How they're utilized with the district?
Yes, because it would make it easier to disperse students if they were closer in proximity.
What about your hours, district offices that are
Mhm.
Is that taken into consideration?
Not in terms of keeping it open. Her question was, if they house district offices at the campus, would that be a criteria on keeping the campus open? If all of the other things showed that maybe that was one that we wanted to reduce or consolidate. Yes, ma'am.
This is a lot of information.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
you guys have a plethora of information when it comes to the numbers for enrollment, for future enrollment, for the needs of the facilities, for the transportation costs for each school. I feel like between the people who did those facilities assessments and the demographer, wouldn't they just sit together at some level and come up with a recommendation and go, hey, numbers wise, we're looking at this, we're gonna have growth in this area while this school enrollment is declining, and this facility where the enrollment is declining, this would be one of the ones that we would target. It feels like this is big brain work. Have they made any recommendations between all of them looking at it together and going, we can overlay these things and see that, or go, hey, even though enrollment might be declining in this area due to a charter school, it would cost more to transport anybody to another nearby school. It just feels like this is a very complicated, realistically math equation, more so than it is anything else. So have they looked at that, or have they made any recommendations?
Have they made recommendations? Yes, in conversation.
Okay.
Officially, no.
Because
They would say, hey, based on what I'm seeing here, you might want to consider.
Consider those, because I
But
feel
we're-
like that would would be useful for people to know, because those are the experts. We're not the, nobody in this room, maybe except for the facilities guys over there, yeah, you, are realistically experts in looking at the broad picture of the entire district, the way that people who are experts have already looked at this and come up with the data.
But what I would really like, what I really want you guys is for the community to come up with this organic. I really don't want an outside entity saying what we should do going forward if this group doesn't feel the same way. Now, don't get me wrong. If I see the group going in the opposite direction of what's been recommended, at some point I'd say, hey, the people that we talked to said this. But I just really want us to go through this process and see if we get to that same decision, and then we can make that recommendation to the board. So when people question how we got here, we can say this is the organic process that we went through to get to. Does that make sense? No?
Oh, no, just one more thing. Only no, because I don't feel like I could spend hours looking at this and I still wouldn't. It's still too many factors to factor in. If they had some inkling of what might be good, we could throw it out for discussion and say, hey, they said this. We don't have to agree with it, but the people who overlaid this information thought maybe this might be a direction to consider. Maybe we have an option of things to consider, because this is just a lot of information.
I think the recommendations that they said will come out.
Naturally, organically, easily?
Easily. Yes, ma'am.
I think a recommendation that we might wanna take into consideration is what units, if you will, have already been customized for those units. So like I look at my campus and I have the 2 back units and a life skills unit and 2 ECSE units, and those rooms have been adapted for those programs. And so if we already have put that money in to adapt those rooms for programs,
That
then
makes
I
a
think
lot of sense.
that other campuses are in the same boat.
It
that
kind of goes back to what
needs
she
to be
was saying.
taken into
If there's
consideration.
specialties going on at that campus, we need to make those considerations as well. So we can go through the same list and then identify those schools where we put those specialties in place. Yes, ma'am.
So I work in the health field, and
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
a star rating system for where, if you're gonna, if an insurance company's gonna partner with a hospital, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, you have to score this, you have to score this, you have to score this, and if you don't meet that score, we're gonna drop that contract. Is there something of that nature where you're looking at, like, the top priority things, what the community consider is the most important of a school district, and then doing an audit or an assessment on that, and then giving it a grade, and seeing if it meets the standard of what the community considers what's important for their school?
I think that's what we were trying to facilitate here this evening. And I think that when you look at the information that's on there, when you get enough time to rank each of those categories, again, organically, it's gonna rise.
Okay. And so is there a possibility we can get that seen, like when we say, when we look at this, they score just say the top score you can get is a 5. This score, after you tally up all the variables and we looked at, this school scores a 5. This one is a 4, this was a 2. So that way we can look and say, oh, okay, well, data shows that we should be closing X, Y, and Z or consolidating these 2 schools.
Based on what we just talked about today, what we're gonna do is go back and make this same list. But when you see the list again, it's gonna be prioritized by each one of those categories. Make sense? So the first one where it says how much to, the facility, what is it, utilities. We're gonna put all of those and say, this one takes the most money, this one takes the least. Then we're gonna go to priority 1. What are the things that need to be fixed right now? This is the one that needs the most done to it, this is the one that needs the least. And then we're gonna go on years that it's been in service. This one was built in 2025, this one was built in 1969. And then you'll be able to go across and you're gonna see some commonalities. And organically, you're gonna say, you know what? If we keep this open, it's gonna take a lot more to get that done than somewhere. Does that make sense? So that's what we were going for. We just wanted to make sure that we had all the categories on that list. And we got some recommendations tonight to add to the categories.
Mr. Patrick.
Yes, sir.
I'm still kind of a little confused, you know, earlier we talked about, the recommendations were like maybe 2 middle schools and 3 elementary schools, and you said you're not comfortable with that? Are we gonna be working with 1 and 2, or are we gonna be, I'm talking about the committee, is the committee gonna decide what they recommend is, could it be 2, could it, 2 middle schools?
We can definitely come back to the committee, and if the committee feels like overall, we need to make a recommendation for 5 elementaries and 2 middle schools, we can make that recommendation to the board. We were just saying as an administrative team, that's not what we're suggesting. But if this committee that we have together comes back and says, no, we can get this done by closing 2 middle schools, I can tell you it's gonna be a push. Because right now, the least amount of students that we have in a middle school would be Kirby, and that's about 70.
Oh, I know this isn't gonna be easy to.
So if we were to take 900 out of one and 700 out of the other one, and then force them into the other 4, and I know I said 4, so I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used that word, but if we require all of them to go into the other 4, that's gonna be a Herculean push on transportation, because they're gonna be going all over, and it's going to stretch the capacity of what those schools were built for across the district. Make sense?
Do we have an idea on how many would just leave the district and go virtual or to charter school?
It's hard to guess that, you know, because now the threat's always there, but you don't know how many will actually go. But will this affect, people's comfort level? Yes. Is it moving a lot of cheese? Yes. But if we do it in a respectful and dignified way, and we have the criteria that we use to get there, I think people will be accepting. Because the voters spoke. They said make the cuts, reduce. This is us doing that. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk that. Well, all right, you guys, I don't know when the next meeting will be, that's on Mr. Brooks, but we'll even see if we can put together a workshop on a Saturday. That way you can come in, shorts, t-shirt, and we can kind of get to this for a couple hours and get it done. Make sense? All right. So, that's it, thank you guys.
Something into perspective.